Yum! I'm fondly remembering my last visit to Halifax. Man, did I eat well. And today we're talking all about it on Flying for Flavor. This is episode 5 of Flying for Flavor, and today we're talking about dining. Dining in Halifax, Nova Scotia, to be more specific. Although I had visited Halifax before, my last visit this summer was all about the food. I have already covered 2 episodes about the wine region in the Nova Scotia and Halifax areas, mostly because there was so much that people may not be aware of that I thought it warranted a good explanation and introduction to it. Now, most people listening to this are obviously food lovers, or especially travel lovers and love of dining. But I've always heard that Halifax has such an amazing dining scene, and there's so much that's happening in that city that I really wanted to get a little bit more specific into my questions and learning about what makes Halifax restaurant scene so amazing. So I decided to make a little list for myself because I'm kind of new at this whole media journalism thing. So I went into it with the 5 W's in a notepad, and it said, who are the chefs and restaurateurs? What are they serving? When did this Halifax dining thing start? Where are the best places for me to eat? And then most importantly, why is Halifax one of Canada's big food lover cities? So I decided to go to the expert on the food scene in Halifax for some answers and guidance. And of course, it was over a few beers at Garrison Brewing, which is located right across from the farmers market in downtown Halifax on the waterfront. And I had a great chat with Alexander Henden. He is the Chief Curator at Halifax CURATED Food Drink Magazine. So anyone who's been traveling within the Halifax and Nova Scotia area, you've probably seen these magazines at your hotels, B&Bs, or inns, anywhere in the area. And they also have this really great annual guide that is sort of a go-to listing of all of the best places for you to check off during your visit. So here's a little bit of a noisy chat in a even noisier beer hall with Alexander Henden. Okay, so I wanted to talk mostly about the dining scene here because in our little small Northern Ontario city, we are actually still a city, we don't have a huge dining scene. And I was talking to a few bartenders and people last night trying to narrow it down on what you think, what's that magic thing that Halifax has that you have such a diverse lineup of different styles of restaurants and bars and beer offerings, and what are you doing that we're not?
Well, I think it really just started with a few restaurants coming out of the gates at different points and doing something interesting. Some restaurants that aren't open today, like Fit Resto with Dennis Johnson. Tribes is still here. People like them, and Jane's on the Common, which now it's her daughter with Edna. So there's sort of these pioneers, if you will, that I think inspired people who live here, whether they're from here originally or they came here. They've really sort of inspired this good food revolution that's taken place in the city.
Do you think, is it mostly people who are born and raised here that are behind it, or is it people who have moved here and are bringing
both.
things from elsewhere?
It's really both. You look at the Christakos family as an example with Brooklyn Warehouse, Ace, Battery Park. These are third-generation restaurateurs with George. And then you have many that aren't from here that are also coming in and doing things. And they all work sort of collectively and are raising the boats with the tide, and we're getting to reap the rewards as the consumer.
Wow. So I'm trying to think of what would be coming first. So do you get someone to do one restaurant really well, and then you look for spin-offs on that? Or is it something that just kind of happens more organically? You get little clusters of
everybody's saying, oh, I can do that.
Well, you do see trends. I mean, like the burger craze, and I think the $18 small plates craze, and you get all that kind of stuff. But then you get new, fresh things that nobody's seen before. Like this year, we're going to get an authentic Mexican restaurant with a tortilla maker from Mexico making fresh tortillas. So that's something completely new here. In Toronto, that's not new because they've got lots of Mexican places. But you do see from time to time somebody coming and trying something, inspired from a vacation somewhere, or just always was passionate about something, bringing it to market, and maybe that'll fuel the next trend. I don't know.
Do you find that people here in Halifax, whether they're from here originally or they are just coming here now, love to travel, and I think that might be part of it, or does it have any influence on it?
Well, the restaurateurs definitely like to travel. Some of them even go on sort of trips where, like, they go to Brooklyn or something, and just do stakeout, or go to Philadelphia, or go to Mexico or wherever, and just look at how people do things differently. We actually have started doing that as a magazine also, and it's one thing to be in a great city with a great, really good food scene, but it's a whole other thing to go see someplace, in a different part of the world, and how they're doing it, and realizing, we got really great stuff, but what about this? What about this? And I think that's part of what's fueling the food movement here.
Okay, so here's probably an easier question.
Yeah.
What made you decide you needed to have a curated food and drink magazine here in Halifax? What was the turning point where you thought, I think we need a magazine?
Well, so I came here as a tourist in 2007. So I lived in Edmonton at the time, and we were coming here 2007, then we were going to go to Ottawa in 2008, and then we were going to decide at the end of both trips where we were going to move.
Oh.
So we came here and decided not to do the Ottawa trip, but to move here, and then 2010 I moved here, not knowing what I was going to do. And the magazine didn't come till about 2012, April 17, 2012.
And it was called something different.
Yeah, it was called Local Connections Halifax, and it didn't have a food focus per se. I mean, every single issue there was more and more food focus. I guess we're just a natural progression, but I don't know. I just felt like some stories weren't being told, and there was an opportunity and a little gap for me to start something up. And right away we started doing events as well. So we do a lot of food and drink events.
I saw you have a sugar one coming up next spring.
Sugar, yeah. It's a sweets it's not a desserts event, but it's a sweets focused event with lots of fancy cocktails and wines and savory dishes.
I guess sugar comes in many forms.
Yeah, it's the idea that it's sort of a secret indulgence. So we really want the very best of everything at that event. And we do beer events. We have an East Coast Cider Festival that we do, and then also 2 years ago we launched the Curated Guide, which is actually our top product. Actually, we have. So it's a food and drink guide that.
And how often does that one come out? The guide?
Right now, once a year, and next year it'll be once a year as well.
Because I've been seeing them in the stands when we were at the Inn on the weekend, like a few days ago. A lot of places I go to, there's a little stand, and they'll have both the latest issue and the guide in there.
They're in all the best places.
I guess I went to all the best places.
Yeah.
That's good. All right, and then I'm curious, your top 25.
Yes.
So how did you come up with the top 25? They done like surveys as a group, anonymous requests?
So I'll explain how it was done in the past, because it's about to change. First and foremost, it's not a People's Choice Award. So, in this market, we have a newspaper called The Coast that does People's Choice. So it's all about anyone can vote. They're all going to say what their favorite restaurants are, and then that's who's the best restaurant. Whereas how we do it and how we're going to continue to do it is we want to determine who is the best from a critic's perspective, somebody that does go to a lot of restaurants, that really is, I'll say, an advanced culinary explorer.
Okay.
So what we've done in the past is, I'll use last year as an example. We had 12 people that I trust personally for my own, which restaurant to go to. We asked who their favorite places were, and we took all of that information information compiled and also all the information I get from going to all the restaurants that I go to, and that determined the 25 best. This year, what we're going to do, or going into next year, what we're going to do is there's going to be 25 judges who are going to have a list of 50 restaurants that they're all going to have to rate.
Okay.
They're only going to be able to give them a rating if they've been there in the last 12 months.
Okay.
And it's going to be out of 100. So you have 25 judges that are going to determine 25 restaurants, which is going to be, and there's lots of process involved. Like there's different, like there's the first 5 how they get picked, the next 5 how they get picked. There's going to be actually right here at Garrison Brewing, we're going to have a judges dinner where the final 10 of that 25 list are going to get picked. So it's really sort of a process that we've created, a system for determining who the best is. We think the outcome will be better as a result, and we always want to have the best. If it's 25 best, it should be 25 best as close as we can. But we really sort of formalized the process for it, and this year will be the first year where we really have that in place.
And what's the feedback like from the restaurants themselves? Just out of curiosity.
If
I got my own little
you're
side
25
project,
best,
so.
it's great. If you're not, then you're
No, but when they're not, are they just getting angry? Are they asking what they can do to improve? Is there any kind of way that they can take some of the information and use it to get better?
Well, what's interesting, actually, let's combine both those things.
Okay.
We had one restaurant that made the 25 best that was looking for areas to improve. And I think that's just fantastic.
Yes.
I think restaurants that are bent on finding that next level are the ones that are going to ask questions, and the ones that really feel they're the best and don't feel that they have to improve are the ones that are going to be more likely to be angry and personalize things and just be very divisive about things. And there are a number of restaurants in the city that are excellent, but they're never going to be any better than they are. Whereas there's other restaurants in the city that they don't stop. And like the Brooklyn Warehouse, for example, never stops trying to move forward. And it's the same thing every time I meet with them. They're always trying to find one way somehow to move it forward. And that I like a lot.
That's passion.
That's passion. That means you're also focused on your craft. You're not just naturally talented and milking it for what it's worth. You're hardworking, and you're really willing to break it down intellectually. What makes a good restaurant experience? What makes a good plate? Anything.
So I got a few of my questions answered so far in that segment. I think I've got an overall picture of what the dining scene is actually like and who are the big players. Any of those restaurants that he referred to near the beginning of that part of the interview, I am going to provide all of the links on the show notes. And of course, you can always find them at stephaniepichet.ca/flavor5. So that's flavor spelt the Canadian way, FLAVOUR 5. Now, a couple of things. One, I love that term, advanced culinary explorer. I'm going to have to steal that one. And I also wanted to point out that he was talking about how they gauge and choose their top 25 restaurants within their guide magazine. And I was asking questions based on the fact that I've started a little side project, passion project, I like to call it, here in Sudbury, Ontario. And it's more about having the locals basically be the ones to vote and critique the restaurants, but anonymously. So it's called Sudbury Secret Foodies. If anyone does a Facebook search, you'll be able to find the page. Anyone in the Sudbury area can actually join and follow along, or if you're actually traveling to the Sudbury area, you can keep an eye out on it as well. What I basically do is collect data from a group of anonymous diners. They are locals who are passionate about eating out, and once they have signed up with me and created a sort of a profile for themselves, I give them a unique user ID code so that it stays anonymous. And every time they dine out, they basically just send me their feedback through this very short survey form. I take the data every 2 weeks and I post a top 5 list, and it's just basically a running total. Kind of gives a shout out to some new restaurants that might be seen, and then some really great standbys that have always been popular, and they tend to be popping up at the top of the list. But it's basically a way for restaurants to get some recognition who are favorites among the locals, and not necessarily relying on tourists who may only visit that one restaurant once while they're passing through or visiting, and their make or break dining experience really changes anyone else's perspective or choice about dining there in the future. So it's really kind of celebrating the locals. If anyone outside of Sudbury wants to try out something like this in their own hometown, I am more than happy to explain my process in more detail and how I arranged it. It does take a little bit of time, maybe at the beginning, to set it all up, but since I've done most of the hard work, I think it'd be kind of fun to have other secret foodie groups out there throughout Northern Ontario and beyond. So if you have any interest in starting one up in your own hometown, send me an email at flavor@stephaniepiche.ca. So speaking of secret, remember my secret servers that I introduced in the last episode. They are a group of restaurant servers here in Sudbury that I took out for lunch and picked their brain about what it's like to be a server in the restaurant industry these days. So here's a little bit about what their maybe pet peeves are that kind of drives them crazy when having to deal with their local diners. So what's your pet peeve?
People who don't treat me like a person.
Yeah.
I am a person.
So what do you mean? What do they treat you like?
Well,
Servant?
just people that ignore you, or like, and I'm a bigger guy, you know, like you can't miss me when I'm standing at your table.
You go, hi, I'm Chris. Can I get a water?
Yeah, you don't even get After that, I was like, so my name is such and such, in case you were curious. And I've actually said that to tables before, and they've kind of like, I can tell I've kind of caught them off, but I'm like, good.
Yeah.
It matters, because to me it matters.
We're not a slave. We're a person.
That's cute.
Yeah, and the more you treat me like a friend, then the more you're gonna get out of me at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. You know, and I don't think they understand like how much the little extras that servers can actually do to make your stay more enjoyable. But if you make it so I don't want to come to your table, you're not going to get those things. But if you treat me like a person right off the bat with a smile and a hello, and you know, if you find that I'm taking orders at the table and you start talking to your friend, it's polite to pause the conversation when I get to you so you can order, not wait for me to finish your story 3 minutes later, because I have plenty of other things to do. Plenty.
True.
I've walked away from people before and said, well, you're busy, I'll come right back.
Yeah.
You know, and half the table is ordered and there's those two still talking, I'll come right back because those other 20 people need me to do something, you know?
That's right.
And will stop talking for me.
Or when they're calling you over, they're like, we want to order our drinks. And you go and they're like, so what are you having?
Yeah.
And what are you having?
Right.
It's like, but I thought you were ready to order.
We're ready to order. Are you? Are all of you ready?
Are you like, can I give you some more time? No, it's okay.
Yeah, they want you to stand there while they decide. And you're like, but I have to bring him a Pepsi and him another steak and him. Oh,
I promise I'll come back. I really will.
Yeah.
Any other little pet peeves that you can think of?
For me, it's very frowned upon at the keg to give away a table. So the way it works is we come in an order, and then we get cut as the night goes and it dies down. But now if you have a table that decides to stay there all night, you're stuck till the very end. So and I think it's silly. You might as well get rid of the other person, and you can keep taking tables. So so now you're kind of just twirling your thumbs and you're playing the waiting game. So what I started doing when I go out to restaurants and I know I'm going to be there all night, I ask the waitress, I say, am I like your last table, or are you going to be here all night?
Like I felt bad. I was out last night and I completely lost track of time.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize until we got up to leave that the restaurant was happening. I thought, oh my God, we're probably your last table.
But if you would have said, can I settle up with you, then that relieves the waitress and she can go home, and then they'll just ask someone else to keep an eye on you for the rest of the evening. But if you settle up with her, then she can go home. That's all. So if you know you're just having water until closed, why not settle up or ask to be?
I wasn't having water. Don't be silly.
Yeah, but just something I always consider now when I go in.
I'll just get my drinks at the bar.
Speaking of drinks at the bar, that's one of my biggest pet peeves is when you ask customers, perhaps they're waiting at the bar before their table, when we ask you to settle your bill before we move you to a different section, it's not because we're trying to be difficult. Like there's reasons behind it. Like that bartender is doing all this work serving all these people and not making any tips off of it because we transfer your bill over to the table, you know.
Correct.
So
I always ask as a guest when I'm at the bar, you know, would you like me to settle this up now? If they say, no, don't worry about it, I'm just going to transfer you over to the other table, then I will.
Well, that restaurant probably has a transfer system in place where they get tips from that bill.
Okay.
'Cause it's kept separately.
There's a little behind the scenes thing for you.
Yeah, they give 7% of the sales. So the waitress that gets that table gives 7% of the sales to the bartender for making the drinks.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
All right. So if your restaurant doesn't have it and you're working there, you got to implement that.
If you had to give one tip to the average diner here in Halifax, as in this is one thing that wish you could just sing from the rooftops of how to make their experience better here in Halifax, what would you say?
Do a little homework, I guess, at the end of the day. Well, two things. Do a little homework, find out a little bit about the restaurant that's serving your food. Like, is this, do these people really care about their community? Do they care about fresh food? Are they serving what's current in terms of the drink side of things? We got craft beer, or did they sell their souls to, take the kickback to have all the Molson taps? And then on the other side of it is to be open-minded and to explore and to go somewhere you maybe have never been before, which honestly I think is happening already in Halifax. I think what's so great about the food scene right now is the amount of, they're not just curious, they're actually culinary explorers. They're going to beer bars for tastings. They're going to restaurants that they've heard about. They're eagerly seeking these things out. And I think that's the best approach. You're not always going to win every time. You may not like something, or you may find you don't like something, but then years later you end up liking it because your tastes change, your palate changes. But be open-minded, but also do your due diligence in terms of, is this something that really deserves my attention?
Good. I like it.
You know what that sound means. It's time for Fly in My Soup. This is the time of the episode where I get to vent a little bit. And since we're talking about dining, I thought it was a good time for me to sort of get something off my chest. I travel a lot. I go to different cities, I go to different towns, and I go to different countries. And one of the joys that I have is trying something new. I have this little rule for myself. If I am going to another city, if there is a restaurant that is the same as what I already have at home, I am not going to waste my appetite, my time, and my money visiting there. So it's one of those things, unless there is nothing else around, which is very rare, you're very seldom, if at all, going to find me in any kind of a chain restaurant that I already have in my hometown or that I eat at when I'm traveling often. So I don't tend to visit a Tim Hortons, partly because they are everywhere here in Canada, but it's one of those things I don't normally eat them at home or eat there at home, but I do when I'm on the road because drive-thrus sometimes are just easier. However, I'm also looking at other bigger chains for more of that quick casual dining atmosphere, pizza places and quick steakhouses and things like that. Nothing makes me more sad than going into a town where every single place that you recognize the name is full. And all of these other great places that are filled with locals, there's very few tourists in them. And I don't know whether it's because they just don't want to take a chance, but I think that's part of the whole experience of seeing someplace new. So I'm really going to beg and plead with all you travelers out there, go to another city and town. And even if you have the kids, you'd be very surprised at how kids are so open to trying a place that's new and looking at new menus and trying new flavors. Having a default is just sort of a given. And it's not a given, it's kind of I want to say it's a cop-out. Yeah, I guess it's a cop-out. You don't always have to be eating the same thing. And there are always restaurateurs and cafe owners and bake shop owners and all these other places on your travels that are just waiting to serve you. They survive by tourism dollars in just about every city, and they really need your support. So maybe you can make that little rule for yourself going forward.
About how to find out and do your homework about
Where to eat and drink.
Yeah, so
Well,
what would be your first recommendation?
Well, to use the curated guide, I guess. So we Curated Food Drink Magazine 2 years ago launched the curated guide, which is literally a list of hand-selected restaurants in a printed guide. There's an online version of it, curated guide, thecuratedguide.ca. And we've done the homework for you. We've done the best job we think we can in terms of describing what the experiences are going to be, and just sort of help you to sort of look through and see what's available.
And I think you were kind of showing me earlier about a handy little app.
The online version is thecuratedguide.ca. It looks like an app, but it's a website. Eventually there'll be an app also. That's sort of our vision for it. But right now it's full function online version of it. For Halifax only, unfortunately, at this stage. But it really, you can find places to eat. You can find where the breweries are. You can find where the wineries are. You can really map out your experience. You can look by price point if you want. It's really, I think, satisfies that need to have sort of a starting point. It's not a directory like so many of these guides to restaurants, I feel, are just directories. When you've got a shopping mall food court listed along with beaver tails in your ultimate food guide, something's missing. So we've really taken the time to try to showcase the best possible dining experiences from, a little diner, cheap eats place to 10-course tasting menu. So it's all in there, and it's a wide range of culinary experiences to have, and it's nice to have tools to help you sort through and find the best ones.
So maybe they can be doing their homework online before they even arrive. And then they have their whole arsenal of
it's funny because what the product really is at the end of the day, it's a catalog of good places to go. And I think if you go to every single place in the guide, at least 9 times out of 10, you're going to say, yeah, that was worth my money. And I don't know any other guides that have that. So it's kind of unique, I guess, for us.
It's time for the table topics of the week. So for those of you who don't know what table topics are, they're these little cute boxes of random questions that get conversation started. So I like to conclude each episode with a table topic, and I'll answer the question myself, and then I'm going to put it out to you. So today's question I actually pulled randomly from the road trip kit, and the question of the day is, if you could bring anything home with you as a souvenir, what would you pick? So that's kind of general, and it kind of depends on where you're traveling to, but I don't know about any of my other food and wine lovers out there. So yes, I bring home wine if I'm from a wine region, but if it's not a particular wine region, I tend to buy food. So no, you can't bring home, fruits and vegetables and meat products and dairy. I've heard of people trying to sneak that into their suitcase, and it doesn't usually end well. But I do like to go to a local grocery store or other little food shop where locals buy their supplies, and I'll pick up spices or other little kind of dried or boxed ingredients of something that I can't get at home that's going to help me duplicate recipes that'll remind me of that trip when I get back. So I have a fascinating collection of all kinds of ingredients that I've had on trips that I brought home with me. I'm also easily admitting that I don't always use them as quickly as I should, and I probably buy too many. But if anyone runs into my son, he can ask, or he can attest that when he was younger, when my husband and I would go away, I used to buy him little boxes of cereal from the country that I was in, just because I was so fascinated about what types of foods there were out there. So just a fun little story. If you have specific souvenir or something that you like to shop for when you're traveling, feel free to send an audio message using the Facebook page Send Message button. And you can send it audio by clicking on the microphone button as opposed to typing it. Or you can simply just type it and just send me your thoughts, and I'll share them on an upcoming episode.
Even our top 25, our 25 best, we don't, and we were playing with the idea of announcing, restaurant of the year or whatever, but at the end of the day, what my concern is here's two extreme examples. So you look at Fleur de Sel, which is recognized as one of the best restaurants. It's a tasting menu. We just went for dinner there. It's exceptional. And then on the other side of the spectrum, one of my favorite places is Didi's Ice Cream, which just basically does ice cream and has burritos. They really have nothing to do with each other. So how do you say that one is better than? It's very difficult to get that. What is the standard definition of a restaurant, and how do those two, which probably neither one is a standard definition of a restaurant, fit into that? So for now, it's just 25 best, and we are very inclusive with our guide in terms of what's going to be in there. But at the end of the day, you kind of have to figure out what you're looking for in terms of experience, because if you go to a tasting menu style, you're going to pay quite a bit of money for very high quality production, very small plates. You'll be full in the end, but it's going to be a really different experience than going to a seafood place with these giant lobsters on your plate, right? So it's they're just, I don't know, explore a little, find what you like, and bend the rules a little bit once in a while, I guess is.
Okay, well, I have a great follow-up question to that.
Okay.
So we already have our dinner reservation done, but we need a place for lunch. So where should we go? It's our last meal here. Where do we go?
Last meal here. So lunch is an interesting thing because a lot of places are closed for lunch. I have two places I think you're gonna win with lunch. My favorite one, as it sits, has to be the Brooklyn Warehouse.
Oh yes, you were talking about there.
For me, the Brooklyn Warehouse is the definitive Halifax restaurant. It has the story, it has the progression. But what's interesting about Brooklyn Warehouse is the lunch service and the dinner service. It's almost like there's two restaurants going on. And they understand what both services really are all about. So the lunch service is $12, $14 plates, really nice sandwiches like meatloaf sandwiches. Really nice, really different style of fish and chips, but just really nice, more quick service oriented experience, although you can really take your time there as well. And the other one, and I'm assuming they're open for lunch, would probably be in downtown Dartmouth at the Canteen, which is pretty fantastic too. So I've never actually eaten their lunch. I've had brunch there, but I think they're open for lunch, and that's another one that would be interesting too. You can take the ferry from here, go across, and it's a short walk up to the Canteen.
And how often does the ferry go?
The ferry is like every 15 minutes. Or at least, 15, 20 minutes off peak. So you're not going to wait too long. And it's a very short ride. And if it's sunny out, you can sit on the top deck and get the whole view of the harbor. Which is probably the best experience for $2.50 that is available in the city. So,
well, that gives me a couple options.
Two Doors Down also. I want to add Two Doors Down.
Two Doors Down. I heard about that.
Yeah, so that's Craig Flynn's second restaurant. He's got 3 now. real pioneer in this market, but two doors down and Brooklyn Warehouse, I would, if there was a top 10 in the city, those two and the canteen all belong on that list for sure. And as far as I know, they all do lunch.
No pressure. Now I'm going to make sure I do better all of them. So by the time that this episode airs, I'll have all kinds of photos and I'll be able to show the winning selection of where I end up going.
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah.
Bet you can't guess where I went. Well, if you browse around on my website, you probably figured it out. But yes, I chose Brooklyn Warehouse. I really enjoyed his enthusiasm describing the place. I love the idea of that comfort food for lunch. I was down by the waterfront and I really wanted to have something different. So I took the 10-15 minute taxi ride to a little bit outside of that waterfront area. And I was pleasantly surprised at how homey and comfortable I was there. So I decided to treat myself with all of my bad eating to one last, not necessarily the healthiest thing for me, but I did order the BK filet sandwich. So it is a fish sandwich that was so good. I kept like pulling up, you're actually pulling apart the bun to see what's inside, and maybe it's just me or who does that, but I was just, everything about it, it was light, it wasn't overly greasy, it was just really well balanced and really well done. So I had to make sure that I wanted to share that experience with you without actually sending that fish sandwich to everybody. So I managed to get in contact with their head chef, Stephanie Ogilvie, and she's been kind enough to share the recipe for the sauce on that sandwich. So I'm going to include it in the show notes so that all you have to do is bake up a good batch of that, especially if you're going to be having some fish and chips. I think it's a little bit of an upgrade instead of just classic old tartar sauce. So again, that's going to be at stephaniepichet.ca/flavor5. And as well as that, I'm also going to have a lot of little restaurant reviews and stuff that I did for my dining adventure in Halifax. And I'll have the link to those reviews on there as well so that you can kind of map out where you're planning to eat next time you're visiting the Halifax area. I'll also include one or two recipes that I thought that I was really inspired with that are kind of my own takes on some of my favorite things that I eat there. So a couple last things I wanted to talk about. Travel tips. So people are always asking me about, like, how do I choose places to go when I'm visiting a particular city or country? I have a couple of rules that I tend to use, and it's always worked well for me. So my number one rule is, regardless of where you're visiting, I always want to look around for a place to eat that's busy. And number two, it needs to be full of locals. So to give you an example, I was in Australia this spring, and I was in this city that had the traditional Chinatown area in its downtown core. And our hotel was nearby, so we were wandering around and through the market. And it was interesting how most of the Asian places, even in this Chinatown area, were empty. Their food court in this little attached market area was packed, but all of these restaurants on the street, and it was noon, and I think it was even a Friday or Saturday. It was just surprising how quiet it was. So as we were wandering around, we stuck our head in a few places, and it didn't seem all that busy until I came across a Argentinian restaurant. I know you're thinking, why would I choose an Argentinian restaurant? I'm in Australia, and it's Chinatown. That's just how I roll. Because this place is at noon. It was almost half full. And it was also filled with people in suits having business meetings. And my first thought was, okay, if I'm taking a client to a business lunch, I'm not taking him to anywhere that I know that the food isn't going to be top notch. So it was an easy win for a choice for me. And I did have a fantastic meal, all kinds of grilled meats, and I had some snacks and fries, and even the server recommended a fantastic wine for lunch, as well as which wineries we should be visiting in the area later that day. So the whole experience was great, and I highly recommend that little tip of mine. So if you like that tip and you want others, I actually made this little collection of travel tips for foodies. That's an old blog post on my website, and I also included that link in the show notes. And again, that's stephaniepichet.ca/flavor5. So I want to say a big thank you to Alexander Henden of Curated Food and Drink Magazine and Guide for taking time to hang out and drink beer and ciders with me on a busy Saturday morning. It was a lot of fun. I really got a lot of insight into what makes Halifax dining so interesting going forward, and I'm excited to hear his enthusiasm about what is coming very soon. I think there's just going to be more and more restaurants and more bars and more wine bars and more flavor that's going to be basically popping up in that area over the next little while as well. So I'm interested to see, and I can't wait to go back. So thanks to Alex, and of course thanks to you for listening again. So this is episode 5, and next episode, again, we're going back to wine. It's going to be a little chat with a friend of mine from Cape Town, South Africa, and a beautiful story about one of my favorite wineries here in Ontario. So make sure you check it out on episode 6, which is coming up later this week. And have yourself a wonderful day.